Making a good game and selling it are two different things. A game developer could spend tons and tons of time working their asses off making a great game. And whether you don't know anything about marketing or the climate's just bad for the game, very few people might buy it. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 good games that flopped in sales. And number 10 is Blur. The thing about video game sales flops is that failure is kind of in the eye of the beholder. Who's the accountant? Is it the game dev? Are the criteria for success a good game or sales? Some games barely manage to break even, and they're still considered a success because of the impact they have, or maybe just that they did what they set out to do. On the flip side, you can get games like this one, where the game manages to sell 500,000 units but is considered a commercial failure. Blur was a game with a lot going for it. It was made by Bizarre Creations, the guys behind the awesome Project Gotham racing games. It was a fresh take on the racing genre with its focus on arcade action and vehicular combat. And most importantly, it was extremely fun to play. It's a great game, but in Activision's eyes, it failed to capture an audience, and despite pretty good sales overall, was considered a flop. It got great reviews and sold moderately well. I'm sure enough to turn a profit. But that wasn't enough for Activision. Work on the planned sequel was halted and the studio was closed in 2011. Just one more great studio that got chewed up and spit out by Activision. More like de-Activision. And number 9 is The Evil Within 2. The original Evil Within had promise and sold relatively well, but for whatever reason, the sequel just didn't get the same level of attention. Compared to the first game's 800,000 units sold in a single week, The Evil Within 2 managed to sell only around 200,000 units. Part of that can be explained by the fact that they were only counting the physical sales numbers versus the digital. This was a time when we were just transitioning into digital sales. Physical sales were really what mattered to companies at this point, but even figuring in digital numbers, the game sold significantly less than the previous entry, which is a shame because Evil Within 2 is a pretty damn great, actually a big improvement over the original game in almost every way. The only real negative is it's not as scary as the first one, but in every other way, it's a big improvement and one of the best survival horror games out there that isn't called Resident Evil. Why it failed to do as well as the first game, I don't really know. Maybe the negative reactions to the original turned people off the second game. Maybe it came out at a bad time, wasn't properly advertised by Bethesda. There's a lot of reasons that a game flops, but in the case of this one, where it's an improvement upon the original, a big one, it's just kind of confusing. By every metric, it should have done better. Like, they didn't do anything wrong. Like, if they had called the game More Evil Within or The Evil Within 2, Still Evil Within, I could see people taking it less seriously, but they didn't. They just made a better game. What the? At number 8 is Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope. Might be hard to believe, but the first Mario plus Rabbids game sold a frankly insane 10 million units. It's by all estimates a massive success for such an unlikely idea. I mean, seriously, Mario and the Rabbids teaming up, and beyond all rational thought, the game is not actually just good, but it's great. It really was a 1 in a million kind of game. A truly out there premise that feels creative, fresh, and it sold really, really well. So of course Ubisoft went back to that well with the sequel, Sparks of Hope. They'd be crazy not to. But in comparison with how well the first game did, the sequel totally flopped. I couldn't find any hard data, and expect that a lot with this list. People don't exactly broadcast their failures, and I don't think they're required to report sales numbers, at least the digital ones. But Ubisoft has confirmed the game underperformed. And the only metric we have is physical sales in Japan, where you do have to report the physical sales, and that was only 17,000 copies. Take that with a big grain of salt, because Japan is a small market compared to North America, and physical sales in 2022 are a small fraction of a game's total sales. Not that 17,000 times 60 is nothing, but for Ubisoft, it's definitely not a good sign. which is a shame because the sequel, while a bit different from the first game, has a lot to like about it. The new combat system is fun and fast, and the world design's more open and interesting to explore. By all accounts, it's a very good sequel, but sales were terrible compared to the original. It's likely that people needed only one Mario and Rabbids game. The shock value kind of wore off and people moved on. It's not novel anymore. And while I think Sparks of Hope is great, despite it seems like a major factor in the original game's success was just how unlikely it was to be as good as it was. You don't really have that the second time around when you've proven that games are good, which is a counterintuitive thing to think, but my thinking is you'd probably need to wait quite a while so that people are like, wow, are they going to make a sequel to this? And then you announce it and they're like, yes, a sequel to this. They didn't do that. They were just kind of like, let's do this like every other game franchise we do with sequels, which is too many of them. And then the second one came too soon, which is a shame because I really think it deserves a lot more attention. And number 7 is Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, one of those games that just seems like it should do well. The first game had a huge Kickstarter and sold extremely well for a computer RPG, but the sequel never managed to meet those sales numbers. Even compared to its contemporaries like Divinity Original Sin 2 and Pathfinder Kingmaker. Maybe it's the fact that all three of those games came out about the same time and people were split between Divinity's beautiful 3D world and Pathfinder's newness. But in comparison to both of these games, Pillars of Eternity 2 did much worse. I mean, this is a game by RPG veterans at Obsidian, and by all accounts, it's a huge improvement over the original and a beautiful game in its own right. In this particular case, I really do think it has to do with releasing so close to the other two big names. They were highly anticipated, and I think they just hurt the game's sales. All these computer RPGs are huge. They take a super long time to play and require an understanding of game mechanics that makes it difficult to juggle more than one game at a time. So people pick Divinity 2 or Pathfinder over this game, which is a shame because it really does stand toe-to-toe with them in many, many ways. It's a much more polished and fun experience than the original Pillars, and while it's still very heavy on text, the writing is also really strong. It's a shame it got passed over by so many because it's really one of Obsidian's best games. And number 6 is Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, another one of those games that didn't do terribly, but didn't do great either. Before finding real success with Hellblade, Ninja Theory put out a few different games of varying quality, but one of their best was definitely Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. It's the bizarre but a fascinating setting of a post-apocalyptic journey to the West, where you play as Monkey and his sidekick Trip on a treacherous adventure through a robot-infested wasteland. It's an extremely unusual setting, and there's some great performances from the main characters, especially from Andy Serkis as Monkey, who actually gets to play a good guy for once.
If we're gonna get through this, then when I ask you to do something, you need to do it immediately.
Okay.
And wow, does he make the most of it. It was kind of a hard sell right from the start. It's a new IP with an unusual setting and no real obvious hook, but the game did all right at launch, selling about 800,000 copies. Oh wait, Bandai Namco just made that up because in February next year, they amended the number down to 460,000 copies, which is a lot less, almost half. They expected at least 1 million copies sold, and with the game only managing about half that number, a little bit more, the planned sequel was shelved. Huge shame. There was real potential here, and Ninja Theory never got a chance to finish it, but that's how it goes with this kind of risky project. And number 5 is Gravity Rush 2, one of the PlayStation 4's best exclusive, almost completely ignored outside of Japan. Starting to see a pattern emerge here. If you're a niche game series that has a surprisingly strong debut, expect all interest to disappear with the sequel. The original Gravity Rush was a modest success on PS Vita, so against all reason, the developers at Japan Studio decided to go totally nuts with the sequel. In the end, they made one of the most interesting and unique open-world action games of all time. It's set in a strange world where everybody just lives on floating cities, I guess. The real draw is the gravity powers, where instead of flying, you can shift to change your own personal gravity. It allows you to walk on walls, fall upwards through the air, and generally get around the world in a way that's completely different from any other game like this. What makes it a standout is it's just a huge polished game with this really strange central mechanic that feels more like it belongs in an indie game. With no real sales numbers, we can only estimate how well the game did with things like in-game achievements and assorted physical sales in certain regions, but it doesn't paint a positive picture. When a game's online component is shut down less than a year after release, it's not a good sign of the game's popularity, and that's exactly what happened here with Gravity Rush 2. As one of PlayStation's most unique franchises, it's a shame it didn't do better, but player interest just wasn't there for whatever reason. At number 4 is Sunset Overdrive. Anything that you should be learning from the last 2 points, it's that unique movement-based open-world action games kind of have to have Spider-Man in the title or they're not going to do well. Made by the tried-and-true developers at Insomniac during their brief tenure making exclusives for Microsoft instead of Sony, Sunset Overdrive is an open-world shooting game with a twist. Instead of running around on foot like a loser, you can grind and bounce everywhere. It's not just a mode of transportation either, it's closely tied in with the combat, and when everything's rolling, it's one of the most entertaining open world games out there, period.
Sewer pipes? Keep moving, cabron. That was harder than it was. Physical blade bots. I hate these checks.
And yeah, the humor can be a little bit of a turnoff for people, but everything else about the game is fantastic. And it's kind of surprised it never managed to really get an audience. It didn't do terribly. It did manage to sell about 320,000 units worldwide, but for a big Microsoft exclusive on their new console, that's pretty weak. I'm gonna chalk this one up to another aspect. It just didn't look unique at the time. It is. Like, this is a unique game that very few games play like. But there were so many other things that just felt like the same thing. You mean a quirky open world game with an interesting movement mechanic? Never heard of that. Its identity is also not super unique from the outside. People look very similar to each other. It's very colorful, which is cool, but there was a lot of really colorful stuff at the time. In terms of presentation, there's just very little that separates it from a very crowded space in 2018. But this game, it stands head and shoulders above its contemporaries. It's arguable that it doesn't really have contemporaries. It's a pretty unique game.
Good work. It's coming back up.
And number 3 is Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The immersive sim genre is cursed. They're always going to be critical darlings, and they're never going to be sales hits. Once in a while, you get a big name like Dishonored that breaks into the mainstream, but most of the time you get Vampire the Masquerade, a game that's a cult classic. You hear about it all the time, but the sales numbers are never good. During its initial release, the game only sold about 80,000 copies, which isn't great for a major release like this, especially one published by Activision. Made by Troika, the guys who worked on the original Fallout games and made another all-time great that also flopped in sales called Arcanum. Vampire is definitely more flawed than a lot of the other games on this list, but still one of the all-time greats. Set in White Wolf's world of darkness, say that 3 times fast, you play as a new vampire in the LA underworld. It's got a weird horror-tinged atmosphere, and it's pretty unique as far as RPGs go. And while it does have a more than healthy amount of jank a lot of the time, the setting and gameplay really make it stand out. It's an RPG and an immersive sim at the same time. Overall, a really ambitious game for 2004, and people loved it despite many issues. That said, it did not sell well. In hindsight, releasing same day as Half-Life 2 probably wasn't the best idea. At number 2 is the wonderful 101. There's few developers who make games as good as Platinum, but consistently fail to find an audience. They've made so many great games, and so many of them have underperformed or outright flopped, like Mad World, Vanquish, the recent Bayonetta Origins. All these games underperformed, and they're really solid games. Babylon's Fall, that was crap, and it rightfully failed. But, I mean, there is complicated context with that one. But one of their best games, The Wonderful 101, sold abysmally, not just once, but 2 times. When it first came out on the Wii U, the sales were shocking, only around 79,000 units in total between the US and Japan. And this was on Wii U, where most sales were physical, extremely low for a Nintendo-published game. And it didn't do a hell of a lot better when it was re-released, remastered on the Switch, PS4, and PC. As much as I think this game is fantastic, it is kind of understandable why it didn't do a lot better. It's an extremely unusual action game, and they throw you right in the deep end at the start, and it leaves a bad first impression with a lot of people. Which is a shame, because if you stick with it, it's really one of the best games for the studio, and that's high praise. If anybody is a long-term gameranx watcher, you know what I think of Platinum Games. Their occasional dud is forgivable because they have given us some of the best stuff in the world, period. And this is really one of their best games, seriously. No, you've probably never thought of combining Platinum Games' typical ideas with Pikmin and, drawing, which is basically what happened here. But man, when you stick with it, it works. And the ending, in particular, gets so over the top and ridiculous. It's some of the best stuff that's ever been in a video game, certainly among the best endings in video games, period. And it really just has to be seen to be believed. And finally, at number 1 is Prey. Of course, an Arcane game had to be number 1. Almost all of their games have either underperformed or straight up flopped. It's the immersive sim curse. These games just do not sell well for whatever reason. Like I said above, there's the rare one like Dishonored that breaks through, or you get a more streamlined one like BioShock. But overall, these games pretty much always review really well, but don't do really well. Prey may well be Arcane's magnum opus, but it flopped. Sales were down 60% over their last game, Dishonored 2, which also underperformed compared to the first. So even compared to a relative flop, keep in mind, Prey did not do well, which really sucks because it's one of the best immersive sims of all time. It's a game that takes a little while to suck you all the way in. It comes off pretty straightforward at first, but the immersive sim elements really come alive in the second half, and it basically reveals itself as a giant interconnected sandbox with one of the most immersive and interesting settings in existence. FPS players just want a more straightforward experience, I guess, at least when you're talking about the mainstream. I'm not sure what it takes for Arcane's games to break through. Deathloop managed to do pretty well, but Prey failed. Deathloop, although probably not as deep as Prey, is structured much more unintuitively than Prey, I think. I don't know. It's disappointing, but it's just another game in the long tradition of Arcane games that don't perform as well. Like their first game, Arx Fatalis, it didn't do well. Dark Messiah flopped, and now, most recently, Redfall fell flat on its face. Though that was deserving, it's not great. Hopefully, Microsoft doesn't push them to do games as a service anymore. I have a feeling that was the problem. But one recent black mark on their record doesn't discount all the good they've done, and while it didn't sell very well, Prey was one of the best. Couple of bonus games for you. Earthbound. Despite being a beloved classic that you usually see near the top of best SNES games, Earthbound didn't do well when it came out, selling only around 140,000 copies in the US against a $2 million marketing budget. Now, keeping in mind games back then didn't sell as much, that might sound like not a huge flop, but again, against a $2 million marketing budget, that's a huge failure in Nintendo's eyes, and really one of the most noteworthy bombs of the 90s, especially because of how good it is. Next, Conker's Bad Fur Day, another massive Nintendo bomb, but this time Nintendo gets a lot more of the blame because they didn't publish the game like Rare's other Nintendo 64 games. They just refused to advertise it because of the game's mature content, which even compared to something like South Park wasn't shocking. The game failed without Nintendo's support, along with many other factors coming out near the end of Nintendo 64's life cycle. Conker only ended up selling about 55,000 copies in April 2001, which was pretty bad coming from Rare, especially during the period where they were at the height of their powers. And finally, System Shock 2, one of the most revered PC games of all time, only sold about 58,000 copies on release. System Shock 2 now is beyond reproach. It's the inspiration for games like BioShock and the entire immersive sim genre. But despite all that, the game absolutely tanked at launch. It's not just new immersive sims that bombed. Even if the game was an all-time great, it still failed. The only explanation is that people don't get these games from the outside. Most of these games are amazing, but they do suffer from this issue of being far more complicated to understand in like a sentence. Like, I can't tell you what System Shock is in a sentence. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero. And we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.